Hello, thank you for stopping by. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I am going to be making a 100-year-old family recipe for chicken pie. It comes from this handwritten cookbook that was originally made in 1926. It was Xeroxed in 1986, and it has been scanned and printed several times since then. Because these are family recipes, I wanted to go through and just try them. So today will be chicken pie. But there are some really interesting other recipes that I do want to get around to. There's a ripe grape pie. There's a sweet potato cobbler. There is a tomato pie, which is sweet. And there is a recipe for molasses cookies in here that was apparently a family favorite. So this was originally written by my great-great-grandmother, Sarah Ann Cole, and my great-aunt, Ruth Cole, cut out pictures from magazines and added them into the original cookbook. Ruth was still a younger girl at home living with her parents, and this was made as a Christmas gift to one of my older great aunts who was out and had her own household at the time. Ruth was a young girl when she helped make this cookbook in 1926, and she was a little bit more mature in 1986 when she made copies and gave them out to various family members. I just want to read off real quick the note that she put in the beginning of it. Josie, Mama would have liked for you to have a copy of this and to know that you still remember her ginger snaps. 60 years ago, she and I made up this book. I cut out the pictures from magazines and she wrote all of the recipes. She gave one to Nora and one to Mary for their Christmas gifts. As you know, we didn't have much money to spend at that time. A few years ago, I Xeroxed several copies, and I am glad to send one to you. Happy baking memories, Ruth. So Ruth, Nora, and Mary are my great aunts. They were my great-grandfather's sisters. I just think that this cookbook is a real treasure, and I want to try some of the recipes and see what they taste like. For the chicken pie, I went ahead and typed it out with the original wording, just so it's quicker and easier to read, and I spaced it out a little bit. This recipe has a lot of steps to it that aren't very well explained, so I'll have to think it through a little bit to figure out what they were talking about. But I think I've got it pretty well. I'm getting to the cooking soon. I swear I'm going to read through the recipe as written, and then I will explain how I interpreted it as we assemble everything. Chicken pie. Cook chicken till tender. Roll each piece in flour. Line sides of pudding pan with rich biscuit dough. Have bottom of pan greased and cover with pieces of chicken. Sprinkle with butter. Sift over it a little black pepper. Slice hard-boiled eggs on this. More butter and pepper. Pour in the water chicken was cooked in. Put on top crust. Bake. And then there is a little note at the bottom that says, a little minced onion and parsley makes good chicken pie better. So it's a pretty basic recipe. Chicken, eggs, and flour are like 90% of it, which is what they would have had access to. They lived in a little homestead in central Oklahoma. If you had the luxury at the time, you could have added an onion and some parsley. They didn't have a whole lot of veggies and things to put in, like carrots and peas and whatever that we would now. I have a good suspicion that they might have served it with a side of canned green beans. Their canned green beans would have been a whole sight better than my store-bought canned green beans. They would have canned them themselves. But my mother always told me stories about her grandmother, my great-grandmother's canned green beans, and how absolutely delicious they were. She never was able to recreate that flavor. So let's get started cooking this recipe. I started by taking one fairly good-sized boneless, skinless chicken breast and cutting it into little pieces. I used chicken breast because that is what was cheapest. I prefer chicken thighs, but they were more expensive, which was annoying. Then I put those little pieces into a fairly small pot of boiling water, and I'm just going to boil them a while until the chicken gets really tender and the water gets some flavor to it. Again, the recipe didn't say any of this. I'm just sort of using doing some guesswork here, because you're going to be using that water that the chicken is boiled in later in the recipe. You're going to be putting it into the pie, so I'm thinking you don't need a whole lot of it. And as far as chicken pieces go, I'm thinking it's not like a whole thigh, a whole leg. It was just whatever little pieces of chicken you had available. And I'm going kind of skimpy with the chicken. I'm not putting a whole lot in there because, again, it's what you would have had available. And there are going to be slices of hard-boiled eggs in there to stretch this. We've got the biscuit dough, the hard-boiled egg, to sort of stretch it out so you don't need as much chicken. So I'm also started hard-boiling 3 eggs. I don't know if that's enough or not enough. I'll just see sort of what works out. I don't have a pudding pan. I'm not exactly sure what they meant by that. I'm going to use a small casserole dish here. While the chicken's cooking and the eggs are boiling, I am dicing up a yellow onion and also chopping some fresh parsley to go in it. And those can both go in the same bowl because they're going in together. I'm going to start on the rich biscuit dough and let the chicken keep cooking in the water for a bit. It took me a little bit to figure out what a rich biscuit dough was, but I think I have it figured out. I decided to start reading the next recipe on this page for a custard pie. And it starts with 1 cup of rich milk. And I saw that word, rich milk, and it connected to rich biscuit dough. So I think that what they're talking about is a biscuit dough made with rich milk. So I went looking for a biscuit recipe that I know they would have had at the time. Any biscuit recipe will probably do fine, but I wanted to use one that I know it's at least plausible that they were using. So I realized on the front of this has been Xerox scanned and reprinted so many times it's hard to see. But if you look here, this picture has snowdrift shortening on it. And I was able to find a biscuit recipe from snowdrift shortening from the 1920s. So that's absolutely a biscuit recipe that they would have been using. They were at least exposed to advertisements by Snowdrift. So I'm using this recipe for Southern tea biscuits from Snowdrift shortening from the 1920s. So I am using Crisco shortening because Snowdrift no longer exists. And this stuff was pretty much as expensive as butter, which is annoying. It used to be a way to save money, and now it's a specialty item. And it's as expensive or more expensive than butter. Anyways, so let's see. Measure dry ingredients and sift together. 2 cups of flour, half a teaspoon of salt, plus an extra pinch. 4 teaspoons of baking soda. 4 teaspoons of baking powder. Now the right ingredient, what it says on here, I just said soda. And I'm not being overly careful with this measurement because I know if anybody who's related to me going back through time, they're not going to be overly precious with their measuring. Tablespoon of sugar. Thought about omitting this since it's going to be a savory recipe, but I wanted to just do it right. So sift this all together. We're doing 3 tablespoons of shortening into this, which honestly doesn't sound like a lot, and I'm measuring around in tablespoons. Then cutting this into the flour with 2 knives. Honestly, I would prefer to just do this in the stand mixer, but I tried the 2 knives. I don't like it. I'm just going to use a fork and smash the pieces. If I have to do it by hand, this is my preferred method. Okay, I got it broken up into little pieces. Now we're adding 3/4 of a cup of water or milk. Because this is a rich biscuit dough and rich milk was milk with a higher butterfat content, I believe, I decided to use buttermilk for this. It may not be exactly what they were using, but I think buttermilk biscuits are going to be the most logical modern equivalent to a rich biscuit dough. If anyone knows any better, let me know, but I think this is right. This is going to be a rich milk, like high butterfat content. Just going to mix this in until I get a dough formed. Actually, I think I need just a tad more. There we go. So to handle and work as little as possible, and to roll this thin and cut with a small cutter. Since I'm using it for this, I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is split it in half because I'm making a top crust. And I'm going to just very gently roll this out to fit into the pan. Pan's got to be greased first. I'm just using baking spray. They would have just used shortening and maybe some flour. I got baking spray. I'm going to use it. Okay, so that gets the bottom pretty well coated. I kind of need the sides. I don't know if I'm going to have quite enough of this for the bottom and the sides. So let's roll this top crust out too. Easy does it. I preheated the oven to 450 degrees. This recipe from Snowdrift Shortening actually gave you a temperature. It said hot oven, 450 degrees. The handwritten recipe just says bake until question marks at question mark temperature. So I'm going to follow the 450 degrees for the biscuit dough. And we'll go from there. I'm going to put these biscuit doughs into the refrigerator to chill out while I finish a couple other things. I peeled the hard-boiled eggs, slicing them I could probably have hard-boiled them a little bit harder. They're cooked all the way through, but they're just a little bit soft in the center to where they don't slice easily. The handwritten recipe does not once mention salt. The snowdrift biscuit recipe does call for salt. The chicken pie doesn't mention it once, but I'm putting salt on here. It's got to be one of those things that's just assumed. So I got the chicken pieces that have cooked, and I'm going to toss them in some flour. I'm using a decent amount of flour because I'm guessing that this is meant to act as a thickener for the water that the chicken cooked in. And by decent amount, I mean just covering it with a decent amount. There we go. Boiled chicken pieces coated with flour. Time to assemble. Biscuit dough on the bottom. Cook chicken till tender. Done. Roll each piece in flour. Done. Line sides of pudding pan with line sides of pudding pan with rich biscuit dough. Have bottom of pan greased. Okay, so it's not supposed to be a bottom crust. It's supposed to be side crust. Oh. All right, so real quick, I'm going to do a surgery and turn this bottom crust into side crust. That might make sense. The bottom would probably got soggy cooked like this. Okay, there we go. Line sides of pudding tin with rich biscuit dough, having bottom of pan greased. Cover the bottom of the pan with pieces of chicken. Okie dokie. Layer of chicken on the bottom. Sprinkle with butter. Saying to sprinkle with butter to my ears makes it sound like you pour like melted butter over it and sprinkle it. But I don't think that's what it is. I think it's just going to be like dot with butter. I just cut up little pieces of butter and I'm dotting them around. Sift over it a little black pepper. I'm not sure why they say sift. I don't know if maybe it's like very coarsely ground pepper they had or something. I'm going to do a pinch more salt at this point because it does seem a little bit light on the seasoning. You know, they didn't have a lot of spices. Slice hard-boiled eggs over this. So I'm going to layer the hard-boiled eggs on top. Oh, I forgot about the onion and the parsley. Should I have mixed it with the chicken? Just going to stick with the layering theme. So it says, then more butter and pepper on top of this. So we've got the layer of chicken at the bottom, tossed with flour, with butter and pepper throughout that. Then we have a layer of hard-boiled eggs here. I'm just adding a little bit of butter and pepper onto that as well. Now, on top of that, I'm just going to add the onion and the parsley. Oh, maybe it should have been mixed in. I'm not sure. It didn't say. But I think just adding it on top is sort of in the spirit of things, adding layers. Okay, this seems lovely, actually. I'm going to do a little bit more salt on top of all this. Pouring water the chicken was cooked in and put on top crust. So I have this as sort of a light chicken stock, like the fat and things boiled off the chicken. I'm going to pour that over, put on the top crust, and stick in the oven at 450. And make sure my top crust is ready to go. Okay, pour water on top. All right, I just sort of filled it up most of the way. There's just a tiny bit of water left, but I didn't use a whole lot to cook it in. So on goes the top crust. And into the oven it goes. One last thing I'm going to do is just melt a little bit of butter in the microwave to brush over the top of that crust right before it's done, just to give it a nice brown. I'm going to clean up and come back when it's coming out of the oven. Okay, I have cooked this for 20 minutes. I think it's ready to go. I did brush the top with a little bit of butter after about 10 minutes, and I sprinkled a little bit of parsley on there. It smells crazy good. Okay, time to grab myself a serving of this. The biscuit dough looks like it came out great. Still a little bit watery inside. I don't know what I did wrong. Maybe I haven't let it cool long enough. Okay, definitely watery inside, which is unfortunate because I know that was meant to thicken up. It had to have been, but boy, does it look tasty. The biscuit dough definitely came out. This will probably be my go-to biscuit recipe in the future. Okay, try to get egg, chicken, and biscuit in there. It's really tasty. Sort of what you'd expect. It's in the pot pie neighborhood. The hard-boiled egg is an interesting addition, and it's very welcome. The onion and the parsley are definitely a good item to have in there. If it was 1920s Oklahoma, you know, I mean, you couldn't spare an onion and some parsley, I could see doing without, but unless things are really that desperate, add the onion and parsley. It's very, very delicious. All of this juice that's all throughout it is really good, and the biscuit does soak it up. So even if it's watery at the beginning, once you scoop it out and like the different pieces of biscuit, they'll start sopping it up and it's tasty, but it's good. I really, really, really like the chicken and the hard-boiled egg together. That's a great combination. The butter all throughout gives it a nice richness. I could have added a little bit more salt and pepper for my tastes, but I just didn't know what I was doing. So I will definitely be making this again. I will thicken the liquid a little bit before I pour it in there and just add a little bit more seasoning. As I was making it, I was thinking I would probably like to add like peas and carrots, more like a modern pot pie. But now that I eat it, it's really good as is. The hard-boiled egg does a lot of that textural and like flavor lifting in there to give it more than just the chicken note. This biscuit though, man alive, like the lightest, fluffiest biscuit I ever had in my life. With nice crunch on the outside, just fluffy clouds on the inside. I'm glad I kept the sugar. It's not sweet. It just rounds out the flavor. Man, I'm about to destroy half of this chicken pie right now. It's crazy good. Well, I hope you have liked this video. Cooking a recipe from a family cookbook from 1926. Let me know if you'd like to see more videos of these recipes. I am definitely interested in making the sweet potato cobbler, the tomato pie, the grape pie. We got a peach roll. We got sugar cookies. Cornmeal dumplings are also something I want to try. There's just all sorts of really interesting old recipes in there. So that's all for today. If you have liked this video, please give it a like. It helps more than you can know. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the future.